Hi, everybody! Welcome to another Hackster Café. Today's guest is Addie from Toymakers. Hello, Addie. How's it
Hello.
going?
How's it going?
Awesome. This is my favorite part of the week, and I'm really excited to have you on because I've been admiring your work for so long. Especially recently, I saw this Flex PCB flower that's on our
Yeah.
video thumbnail here, and I'm so stoked to ask you about that. But also,
Yeah.
I understand you've brought a lot of cool. Ah, beautiful. Oh,
Yeah. Any questions? I love them.
great. Well, we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
let's start with, I understand you have sort of the full range, and the first one ties into your day job. So by day, you are a cardiovascular surgery nurse and research study coordinator, which is super cool. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So back when I was younger, I actually had the opportunity to do lab research at NIH, and that was cool. But I realized after doing lab research for a while that I liked humans more than
Mm,
just the lab because it felt like I was the one being studied
mm,
with all the repetitive motions. And so I went to nursing school, and I knew that I wanted to get into a field that you could see people get better. So I didn't necessarily want to do
mm.
like long-term care or like the stuff that required, months and months of recovery. Where so cardiovascular surgery, you go in there, you fix it, they get up, you get them moving, and so that's where my role was as a cardiovascular surgery nurse. Where if you have a patient that has surgery, then they go to the ICU, get their pressure stabilized, then they come to my unit where I do education. We take out tubes, we take out lines, we do education, we get folks up and moving, and then we send them home.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's a really rewarding, I think, part of the hospital. And it so happens that my unit did not only adults but also pediatrics. So we would do
Mm,
anywhere from 2 years of age to like 95.
wow.
Yeah, so really the whole gamut, and just a lot of really great people to work with. And then I decided to get into a job that combined both my nursing experience as well as my research experience. And so that's where I got into being a research study coordinator. And research study coordinators do like essentially a clinical trial that you hear on the news or whatever. That's what their job is. Their job is to interface between the FDA, their principal investigator, and do all of the recruitment and assessments of the patients, guiding a patient through the clinical trial. Uh, and then all of the documents and like paper pushing that goes into that. Um, but I know we're here to talk electronics, so so I do want
Well,
to
it's all part of
segue.
your story, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So it's so funny because while I was a cardiovascular surgery nurse, one of the things that people have difficulty understanding or reading are the ECGs, the electrocardiograms, and
Mm,
those are the electrical signals that go in the heart. And an ECG, like with the little squiggles and whatever, essentially tell you whether or not the flow of electricity is normal in a heart. And so what I did, this was actually my first project, was a heart
wow.
simulator. And it's a little hard to see, but it's got like yeah, it's I call it the heart me. And it simulates 17 different cardiac rhythms. So everything from normal sinus rhythm to atrial fibrillation. I know quite a few people have that. And it shows the LEDs and how the heart's um, electrical cells are reacting during a particular rhythm.
Wow.
And it's so funny because let me actually back up. So the first project I had was LEDs, right? All of our projects are really LEDs, and it was this like Halloween thing where I was using a cadmium cell where as you got closer, the LEDs would go lub dub lub dub lub dub faster and faster to
Ah,
the and then as you would like back away from it, it would slow down. And it got onto Hackaday. Um, and on Hackaday, like someone was like, this is not an appropriate teaching tool. Like this is not accurate. And I'm like, well, challenge accepted. So the milliseconds of these different like of the different uh rhythms are to the milliseconds of like what you would expect to find on an ECG strip.
Wow.
Yeah.
And,
So
it looks really cool too.
thank
Plus
you.
you sell
Thank you.
these and, people can get them on your Tindie along with lots of other badges and things.
Yeah.
Does it have power on it? Can you turn it on?
Yeah, so this one this one happens to be like a broken one that I need to figure out what's wrong with it. Like everything looks okay, but I have to troubleshoot to see why
Oh, I know
the
that feeling.
yeah, why it's not working. But yeah, normally it's just a coin cell battery, two coin cell batteries that go on the back, and then it will last for as long as those coin cell batteries go. Because at this point in time, I wasn't really thinking about power consumption. I was just like, okay, batteries, they make LEDs light up. That should be good
Mm.
enough, right? I've
Totally.
learned since, but yeah, so coin cell batteries for that.
So we have a question, saying, "Where is the sensor?" What I understand is that it's a simulator, right? It's not
That's
responding to
correct.
anything, or
Yeah. It's a simulator, and I actually had plans to incorporate a sensor, but like that actually adds an entire layer of complication that I'm not savvy enough yet to
I
do.
bet.
But like this actually,
Sounds really
so
intense.
this one, if you break out some of the pins that are available on the back to connect to,
Oh.
um, you can connect it to an LCD, which tells you what the rhythm is. You can connect it to a solenoid, which pulses as if you were palpating somebody's wrist. You know what that
Whoa!
rhythm is, yeah. And then it also will connect to headphones where you can hear how it would sound if you were listening to a patient with that particular rhythm.
I love that, so it's a really multisensory teaching
Hmm.
tool.
Hmm. Yep. So that's version 2, which so this has been a long time. Like let's not lie. That's
Mm.
been a long time. It's one of those projects that, us folks are always like, "Oh, we're going to get to that." And I have version 2. It's sitting in a project box. Uh eventually, eventually I'll get there.
I know that feeling. So you've done education for both your, work in the cardiovascular medical arena, and also you make documentation for your projects. Is there anything that you're bringing to the documentation that you sort of learned through being a nurse?
Uh really just step by step, I think, and to not take for granted the information that people know. I think
Mm.
part of it is just my own experience. So, like when I first started with electronics, uh, it was actually through the introduction of ham radio. There was a show, and I was watching it, and the only person who knew what to do on the show was somebody who's doing ham radio. And I was like, I want to be that person. Like, I don't want any teams to get rid of me. Like, I need to be important. I need to be able to like communicate with other communities. And
Mm.
Whisker, my partner, was like, well, you can just get the ham radio manual and, you know, get your ham license. And I'm like, that's a thing? Like, what? And so I got the ham manual and I turned it to page 1 and I did not understand any of the words that were on it. Like I didn't know what a resistor was. I didn't know what a capacitor was. And so my Tumblr really is from quite a while ago, is really just going step by step. Just saying, okay, uh, these this says resistor. What's a resistor? What's a capacitor? What are these types of circuits? Like, and so that's kind of just how I go in all of my posts. It's just step by step by step. And so um, that's how I approach a lot of like new projects that we come up with. Yeah, I mean this is like information I did not know that I googled that the Toymakers IRC community, that they helped me out on a lot of these posts. And so just creating a brain trust, of people I now consider close friends.
Mm.
Yeah, who have been very kind.
This is super cool. I see a lot of your products and projects are based around synthesizers and also sort of individual modules. Like here's one that's a module that's specifically just like for taking a 7 segment display and making it usable, making a little breathalyzer, making a all these sort of one-off things. Is there anything
Yeah.
electronic that you've designed for ham radio?
Uh, I think not a product. I think the closest thing I got, which is not even really ham radio, was gosh, what is it? It's the radio that you use like a pencil tip on
Oh, the
on like
Drodio.
a say that again?
Is it the Drodio?
No, not the
No.
Drodio.
Oh,
It's a
sorry.
oh man, the name is escaping me, but it's like you use a pencil tip, the graphite of a pencil tip on a razor that you've blued. And bluing is essentially like putting it over heat until it's like oxidized, I think. And that connection between the graphite and the blued portion of the razor creates a radio that can be
What?
powered by like just wire, like it's inductively powered by a wire that you coil around like a toilet paper tube. um and I like it's a god, what is it called?
It's not a foxhole
Germanium.
radio, is it?
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Yes.
foxhole radio.
This is so cool.
Yeah. Yes. Right. So like I didn't know how to blue a razor. I didn't know like what they were talking about, but like I was like, well, I'm gonna try it. This is like a project I can probably do.
What?
And so
I've
I
never
put it
heard of this.
into like a so like at that point in time we were really into cigar box guitars. And so I had a ton of cigar boxes laying around the house. And there's this one that's like a trapezoidal shape, which is almost, it looked kind of like a purse almost. And I was like, I want to make a foxhole radio purse.
Mm.
So that's what I did. Made a foxhole radio purse. So I think that maybe that's the closest thing I've done, which wasn't a product, in terms of ham radio. Because once I got into like LEDs and um, PCBs and things of that nature, it kind of just it like my brain ended up going that direction rather than continuing on the ham radio direction.
Dang, that is so
So
cool. I've
yeah.
never heard of those before.
Yeah, yeah, they are really cool. And you can like tune it and you can get like different radio stations, no batteries required. Yeah, it's great.
Wow. Okay, so you made this foxhole radio purse. That's so cool.
Yeah,
And you made this heartbeat PCB
sorry.
after making the sort of simple LED one where they like got on you about it not being accurate, and you're like, well, we
Challenge
need to.
accepted. Yeah,
So what
yeah.
came next?
So, gosh, so from there, a lot of the Tindie kits, like the small kits. So, you know, I I had ambitions of doing like an organ series, like a
Mm.
brain, a kidney, a liver, and so the next thing I went to was liver, which is where you were seeing the breathalyzer. And
Ah.
I looked at the liver and I just looked at it and I was like, you are not a very pretty organ. And so that's why I changed it into a a wine bottle essentially, where like the bubbles, go up as like the more alcohol you have on your breath. Um, yeah, and then
It's
from
pretty too.
there, thanks. Yeah, so then it's funny because like the way we got into badges was actually because Michael Getzman, who runs CypherCon, saw my heart badge.
Mm.
And the story goes he emailed us asking whether or not we'd be interested in doing a badge. And Whisker was like, no. And like I was like, I don't think so. I don't even know what this badge thing is. And then Michael was like, if you were to do a badge, what would you do? And so Whisker was like, well, I don't know, I'd probably do some basic logic base, cipher, blah 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 blah. And then Michael was like, okay, great, you're hired. And we're like, wait a minute. And so we didn't really consider it seriously until uh you know like I don't know, 4 months before the conference. He was like, "So how are the badges going?" And like we're like, "Oh crap." So that's what this one is.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's what this one is. This was our
Ooh.
first badge, and we we didn't really have any preconceptions. We just knew that we wanted to do something unique looking. And so it's so funny because this one, we made I think 300 of these, and I didn't have any stencil, like a solder stencil. This was one of my first times doing SMT work, and so I had like um, solder paste in those like
Yeah.
syringe tubes, and I literally like bloop 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 each pad for all 300 of these. Yeah. Yeah. And like, I had engineer friends and they were like, "You just need a sense stencil." And I'm like, "I'll be fine. My hand will be fine." And then afterwards, my hand was not fine, but like, the thrill of having gotten them done was kind of like, "Oh, yay, we finished it." So, the amnesia hits, right, of all the pain and suffering. Um
Yeah.
and yeah, so this was year 1, and it was great because this particular one, the the experienced hackers, I guess, came up and they were like, "Hey, so is the goal to turn on all the LEDs?" And I'm like, "No." The goal is to like decipher the code, like because it's a cipher. It's like a decoder ring that you need to figure out. And the students at the end of the conference, like right after it had ended, came up to us and they're like, "Hey, we love your badge. We made like a Python um, simulation of your badge, and we like reverse engineered it and like created it in code, and like this is what we've solved, and this is how we figured it out." And we're like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And they're like, "But we really wish that like there was a puzzle within a puzzle."
Ooh.
And me and challenges, right? Like someone tells me I can't do something, or if I can't, what we're gonna do? We're gonna take up that challenge. Um, and so then that's where we ended up with the cube badge.
Wow.
That was year 2.
That
So
is
we went
gorgeous.
from just a decoder ring to yeah, to a 3D cube. And Alex, you're gonna have to stop me if I'm just like blabbing.
No, this is great.
But so this cube is essentially, it's nice just in general. When you plug it in, however, to the computer, it drops you into a text adventure game. Yep. And in the text adventure game, you have to go around and you have to fix the computer within the game without dying, because of course, you got to be careful. And so once you fix the computer in the game, we were like, yeah, yeah, that's cool. Like you get to play with this little computer. Um, but like we wanted you to be able to go from the computer in your game to the computer in somebody else's game. And so the computer itself is like a 70s era time sharing system with like a Turing tar pit language that Whisker created for it. And within that computer you can change like the LEDs, and just to show you, like this one is the Addie one. Oh, here, let me turn it upside down. It looks a little bit like a heart, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it goes love dub, and it goes from like blue blood to red blood.
Oh.
so so that's the Addie one, because nurse cardiovascular. Um and so what you can do then is you can jump from the computer in your badge to the computer in another badge because of these little IRDA transceivers that are on the bottom here. And so you can go into somebody else's badge, you can change their lights, you can change their motto of the day, you can change, all sorts of things about their badge, and then you can look at the badges that they can see, and then you can jump into those badges
Oh my gosh, that is so
and go from there. And like if everybody's in one particular badge, there's a chat room too. Uh
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
that is so
So
cool.
so yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So we were like, You want a puzzle within a puzzle? We're gonna give you a puzzle within a
I
puzzle.
love this. Okay, so there's a couple things that are coming up here. Well,
Yeah,
the last one that you talked about, the 2016 badges for CypherCon.
yeah.
On your
Look at
blog,
that.
there is, if people want to dive into it, check out the links in the description. There is, in fact, a post about these 275 hand SMD soldered badges and the
Yep.
different colors for different types of attendees and stuff, as well as some other fun stuff as well. Like,
Yep.
ooh, look at this. Very
Our
interested.
time machine. Yeah.
Mm. Is this uh is any of the same technology from the Cube repurposed in this IR transmitter kit?
Um, I think the only similarity is probably just that it uses IR.
It's not like the same
Yeah.
protocol or whatever.
No. Mm-mm.
Ah,
Yeah.
cool.
Same. Yeah. Same engineer though.
Mm.
Um, so wire engineer, we brought him on
Ah,
because he knows like power circuits, and we do not. We were pretty much lucky with our previous creations, but he really kind of upped the ante, obviously, with these designs. And I do want to mention, so this one, do you think I learned from the soldering mishaps of the first badge?
I would hope yes, but
Well,
based
so we
on you
did have
saying
a
that,
stencil.
okay.
We did have a stencil, but we hand placed every single part. We did
Ooh.
not like we did not send these off to China. They were done in my basement with me sitting there like and like me Tom Sawyering our
Your friend.
hackerspace friends to come and like learn how to pick and place. So they're all experts, they're all SMT experts right
Amazing.
now.
I mean, that's great. That's a great part about hackerspaces is that, you get to jump in on
Yeah.
cool projects and you get to learn some skills along the way. Is this the one
Yeah.
you're talking about, Rabbit Hole that you mentioned on some of
Yes.
your blog
Yep.
posts?
Yep.
Cool.
That's the rabbit hole, and we're very fond of them, and they've always been great slave labor. They know
Yeah.
it. They know it. It's but yeah, no, it's these become like what we call them hacker barn raising. Like an Amish
Oh,
barn raising,
yeah.
but a hacker barn raising instead.
I think you had a video about them on here, but I can't find it right at the moment. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
The Rabbit Hole, yeah,
Yeah.
on your,
Yeah.
YouTube
So for
channel.
a while we were doing like uh weekly videos as to like all the projects that folks were working on. So,
Mm,
mhm.
so much stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Here's the cube and the, rotary one. Okay, so these are previous ones, and then you've got the
Yeah.
2018 one. Phone.
Yeah, so this one, um, you know, like with the cube, we were like, let's get into teaching people about like old time systems, right? Like expose them to old systems that they would not have access to now, right? Because everyone's just working on cell phones. So the cube badge was like the 70s era time sharing system. This one, we wanted to give individuals an opportunity to learn how to phone phreak.
Ha!
Um, yeah, so what we ended up doing was we literally made phones that um, people could use. And we also made a phone system that people could connect into. They could war dial, they could call the operator. And on the system, there were like I think one of the numbers, if you dialed it, it would take you into a badge. And if you solved the badge and also dialed into this other particular number, you could move this motorized arm. So I guess let me back up. So there were two badges sitting
Mm.
next to each other, and there was like a plate in between them. And so what you had to do was you had to figure out the number to get that plate to move out of the way so that you could talk from one badge to the other. And then using that badge, you could call all the phones at the same time to like win the game essentially, or win the badge challenge. And so the same students who uh like reverse engineered the first year's badge and figured out the second year's badge, they spent their whole conference, the whole time at CypherCon, doing the phone badge challenge. And it was like minutes, seconds before the closing ceremonies,
Mm.
when like all of a sudden all the phones rang, at once, and we were like, I was like, what's going on? Because I actually didn't know what the end goal was. Like, I had just been soldering. We were just busy there placing parts. But like, yeah, all the phones started ringing, and then like the whole room just erupted, in cheers, and it was magnificent.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
a few terms you brought up, phone phreaking or phreaking, messing around with telephone systems, ever popular, and then also war dialing. Is that a thing of where you're sort of walking around and trying to pick up? Because there's like people do this with Wi-Fi as well, where you're like war walking and trying to pick up people's SSIDs that are sort of open. But obviously this is a previous version of that with phones. I'm curious, is that just
Yeah.
like are you dialing random numbers to see what's there, or?
Yeah, so I think some of it is dialing random numbers to see what's there, but then some of it's also like dialing random numbers to see if you can get access to long distance um,
Ah.
phone connections. So, it used to be, I don't even know, like 50 cents a minute for long distance calls, right? So, if you were a internet savvy individual,
Mm.
or you're like on BBSs and things, and you wanted to talk to a friend in Australia, right? You would probably want to figure out a phone number that you could dial through to get free long distance calls, right? To use like a business lines mm, mm, number, I
Mhm.
guess, to get access, to get free access. Um, And that, I'm gonna be honest, that is as much as I know about war dialing.
The one other thing that I know about phone phreaking is how the magazine 2600 got its title from 2600 hertz, which is the frequency that would activate long distance calling on some AT&T lines, and
Yep,
that's where the Captain Crunch cereal whistles came in and all
yep,
that.
yep.
Ah, oh, this is so cool. So tell us about. Okay, we've looked at some of your designs, and
Yeah.
I'm really curious. You collaborate with Whisker, you've collaborated with Wire Engineer, you collaborate with other people sometimes. So many questions around this, but as someone who's not very good at like collaborating with other people, I'm always
Mm,
looking for how people do it. Like,
mhm.
do you set up? Well, obviously with Whisker, you're partners, right?
Yeah,
But
yep.
then also, so if you're collaborating with someone else, how do you divide up the work and how do you coordinate it? And do you like all get together and work on it, or do you send off what you have and then get it back, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so let's, yeah. So,
Big
um,
question.
the reason we collaborate is because there are simply things we cannot do.
Hmm.
I can sketch things, but my art is not like spetku level, right? and and so as a result, that's when, like, it's at a point in time, or it's when you understand what limitations you have, that you're like, okay, I need to bring somebody is who knows this part, right? So for example, um we brought Wire in because we knew that you can't use coin cell batteries to run everything, right?
Mm.
We were crushed, but, like, frankly, there's a time where you need double A's, when you need lipo batteries, when you need, triple A's, and like that's beyond my wheelhouse. And so, Wire, who happens to be part of our hacker space, uh, was like, "Hey, I'll help you guys out." And those were his, last words. But so, so then, like, at that point in time, it was just us three, and uh, it like our discussions, like for badges and such, are really feature creep. We just sit there late night and we just ask, like, ask each other what we think would be cool. And then we say, okay, that's kind of cool. How can we make it cooler? And then we go to the point of pain, right? And then we're like, okay, well, let's we're now at this painful point. Can we actually accomplish this? And if the answer is yeah, probably, then we move forward. And so, my job in the whole thing really is parts procurement, manufacturing, prototypes, uh, like prototype manufacturing, and acquiring of all the parts, part
Mm.
sourcing, and game design. So like the DEF CON game, I designed that for better or for worse.
Wow.
The Cube badge, I designed that game. The like so our CypherCon badge this year with the flamingos and the llamas and all that. These like the
Yeah.
questions for the the questions for the vending machine that these connected to, I design, right? So things that like don't require engineering brain space, that's kind of me. Um, and then Whisker does like a lot of graphics work. So even though we work with Specku on a lot of the art, when it comes to us, there's a way we have to there's a lot of manipulations honestly that we have to do in order for it to actually work on a PCB, right? Um, so like first off, we realized with the disk badge, and let me see if I can find that one. Ah, here we go. So like the artwork is like
Yeah.
really intricate on this one. And it was originally like 12 megabytes, which I don't think,
Wow.
yeah, I don't think the machines apparently can handle when it comes to like silkscreen and solder mask work. So, Whisker and I had to work together to like figure out how to decrease the amount of uh what's it called? Like uh
Resolution?
resolution. Yeah. We had to decrease resolution. We had to make sure that once the resolution was decreased, that the elements were all in black and white, that there were no items that were more than 4 pixels large, otherwise the PCB manufacturers couldn't handle that.
Huh.
um yeah, so like little things, little like manipulations that still have to happen in order for artwork to work on a PCB. Um and so um so he does a lot of the graphic stuff, kind of also the big picture stuff. Like he's like, okay, well, if we're going to have a badge that is steampunk oriented, then we need to have gears, we need,
Ah.
right, like this one. So he came up with that idea, and so we kind of were like, yeah, sure, why not? So the Geneva Gear Convention, or mechanism, was his idea.
Uh-huh.
um, and then Wire, who's as masochistic as I am, was like, okay, well, you know like these um, this is how the 3D parts can get fit together. This is how much filament we need in order to print these 3D parts. I came up with the idea to use like the mouse switches in order to register the clocked bits. But I provided the LED locations so that when he put together the board, he knew where to put those LEDs. And because he's like, I'm not the art person, I'm just the board person. And I'm like, okay, well, and I want LEDs here, 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 here. And so there's that communication back and forth as to like what's possible, what's not. He'll be like, "How many LEDs do you want?" I'm like, "As many as possible." And he's like, "Okay, limitations. Here's your box. We got 2 AA batteries, right?" And so he'll be like, I'm like, "Okay, well, can we do 40?" And he's like, "Yes." Then I'll be like, then I'm the one who's got to figure out, okay, where can these 40 go? What makes the most sense? What's going to be the most engaging for the person, right? Um, and then with that, like it's a simultaneous communication with our artist, Sarah Petkis, or Spetku, Noodle's mother,
Mhm.
and she doesn't actually necessarily know what our end goal is per se. She just knows, I want like a factory up here. I want, oil down here. I want electricity over here. And like, let's make it old timey ish looking. And then I let her brain go with whatever. She sends it back to me, and I'm like blown away, right? Because
This
the
is
art's just
incredible.
right. I mean, her art's amazing. And then so then I work with that, and like we get the prototypes, like we try to get it so that we are as close to the final product, but very often, because of the amount of time it takes for artwork to, come through versus the time that it takes to test a prototype, like there's kind of this finessing that I end up doing for most of the badges.
There's so many different constraints that you're coming up against, and, besides the fact that there's your time constraints, art constraints, I think, power constraints, um, I've never heard of anyone coming up against the size limitation for, the art files for the solder mask and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's incredible to me. Are there any other constraints, like, since you're making these amazing badges that you sort of pushed up against that regular, PCB manufacturers, fab houses couldn't handle?
Oh gosh. So the interesting thing is we have started working around what the fab houses. So
Right.
strangely enough, fab houses have not yet said no, except for like the size limitation. What they do say though is like what we come across are the limitations of like silkscreen. So silkscreen is not very detailed, and you can't really rely on it for some of the super fine elements, that we prefer. And so, for at least the disc badges, that's, of course, this, whoops, sorry, that's this gear one here. And then
Mhm.
the newest one, there's no silk screen on these. It's,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's all solder mask and copper or hassle in our case. And so we find that we can get much finer granularity. And now I guess I'm letting out a secret. we we can get much finer granularity, or detail with uh just with just the solder mask and no silk screen.
I think I've heard, this before from, like, Bunny, for example, because, with electrical components, you have to be able to isolate them perfectly, or,
Hmm.
with silkscreen, if it's a little bit messed up, it's not gonna break your board, but with the solder mask and the solder placement itself, or copper placement and hassle-coated copper placement, you do have to have that precision, so it makes sense, you know?
Yep. Yep. And so yeah, so we've taken full advantage of it. And so that's like we work in pixels, and we convert between pixels and like,
Mills
well,
or whatever?
mils, right? And it's no more than 4 pixels. So, or sorry, no less. Sorry, no less than 4 pixels. So when I get art, I'm looking at every single line, and I'm like cleaning up like little dots here and there, and it's pretty much like a pixel by pixel kind of job to do.
I just
So
noticed this dragon here, and it kinda reminds me of Trogdor the Burninator. It's super cute.
you know what? We totally have told them we now that we have a relationship with them, we can like joke about it. But yeah, no, for it, yeah, it's a little trogged. Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Mm. Oh yeah, so you folks not only do tons of cool art stuff, and you're masters of the engineering side, and you collaborate with people in different ways. You've mastered those. You're also running a business, which I'm trying to learn right now for hardware and stuff, and there's so much to know. So it's really incredible how many different things you're doing at the same time. And I wonder if you have any tips for people who are wanting to start their own electronics business, because you've been in business since 2013, right?
Yeah. And fortunately, I actually think we have been profitable most of the time. Now,
Dang.
I have to admit that we do not account for our time. We don't account for our labor. And so that I think in that regard, maybe we're like completely in the red. But we are workaholics, so like it kind of works out for us. I guess don't undercharge, don't under yeah, that's what I would say. Don't undercharge for the amount of work that you're putting into your creations. Um, Look into Alibaba. Make relationships with uh, vendors who have parts who are reliable, and who, once you've established that relationship, I mean, that's just a huge part of it, especially for part sourcing. Um, Yeah, and then don't be afraid. So, we in a lot of our products, like we do kits, or we do like already manufactured. I mean, and by already manufactured, that's me. Like, I'm the pick and place. Like, I
Okay,
don't have
that's
a pick
still
and
you.
place
All right.
machine.
Wow.
Yeah, it's me. I'm hand placing, hand soldering these things. Um and it's like, it's okay to do that. You don't have to send everything to China, especially if you feel like it's something that you can hand place. Um
Well, also
but
that enables you to do these really bespoke things, right? Like these
yeah.
zodiac key charm key
Yeah.
fobs things. Like it
Yeah.
says, it says out of stock because when you order it, then it gets ordered
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you can get it personalized and stuff. That's incredible. And because you're
Yeah.
doing Ashbrook, I assume you get 3
Yeah.
boards minimum.
Yep. And
But I
so we were it's so funny, like, with these, I can I be honest? I have maybe sold one
Huh?
of these, like, throughout its history. So it's but these I enjoyed in particular because it was my first time designing a badge that wasn't square, and was like, and had like things on it that did not require a schematic. I was literally just putting points, and I was figuring out how to um how to show copper and not solder mask. So like that, like, these kits almost show kind of the transitions, like the different things I had to learn in order to get to where we are now, right?
right.
And so I'm okay that we don't sell it. Like, I still think it's a cool shape, and I still think, like, it's an interesting idea. Like, would it be cooler if I put LEDs behind it? Absolutely, but then I'd have to think about power. And you know how I am with that. So, um, yeah. So so
I have
that's
my own issues with
those.
that kind of thing. I was trying to make something similar where I was using through holes and vias to let the LEDs shine through, and I learned
Mhm.
through that project that apparently you have to tell them that you don't want it tinted, you don't wanna put the solder mask over the vias or else they'll be filled in and
Oh,
your light won't shine through. But I guess it probably depends on the size of the vias and stuff like that.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. And if I remember correctly, these, I think I used actual, like, holes,
Mm,
not vias.
that makes sense.
Yeah, precisely because I was worried about that covering that they would do with the solder mask. So yeah.
We have some questions.
Yeah.
Griffin in the comments is curious about, I think, about the disc badge, and I
Yeah.
am too. What exactly is going on here? Because it reminds me of an Enigma machine. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
damn
So,
it.
so the theme for this particular year was steampunk. And so, like I mentioned before, Whisker was like, okay, well, we need to have a Geneva gear mechanism.
Love those.
And a Geneva gear mechanism, like, let's see if I can show this side. It essentially has this gear-like looking aspect. And then in here, I don't, do you see the little nub right
Mm-hmm.
there? So that's a little, it's a little piece of copper wire that we soldered actually between two pieces. We call this our hamburger right here. Um, and it catches onto the grooves. Do you see those grooves kind of?
Yeah.
It's a little hard to see, I'm sorry. But it catches onto the grooves, and it forces the advancement of the gear. So it essentially, like, clink clock. Yeah, there you go. That's like a perfect video of it. Um, so it kind of clocks it forward in a predictable manner. And so on this badge, we essentially have four cams, and let's see here, four cams, and you can see how, like, some of them have a little nub, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
generally circular, and then they have a little bump to it. And these are adjustable. And so there were codes around the conference that we had, and you would have to adjust your cams to match those codes, and then you would clock your badge forward to
Ah!
clock them in. So let me get a
And then you have
battery
these
in
little
here.
mouse clicky buttons. They look like almost limit switches type things.
Yeah.
Uh,
So here, okay, let's see if we can. don't know if you can hear that.
I can.
So one, mouse switches are just like very soothing,
They really are. That's
right?
so aesthetically
Um,
pleasing.
and the cams just kind of click down onto these switches as they go. And then when you've solved everything, your badge essentially like gets into a fixed state. I think this one. I'm
That
gonna
is so cool.
yeah,
Did you also do the humans one?
there we go.
Mm, don't remember what year it was. Never mind. This is so
Uh,
cool.
thank you. Yeah,
I think it
so
might have been
this
like
one was really
around
interesting.
2018. There was one. Oh, please go on.
Um, oh no, you're good. So the interesting thing about this was I think like something that people don't I guess think about but necessarily but was like the spacing between the boards, right? So you have
Hmm.
different LEDs. You have some that are small, you have some that are big. You have SMT ones, you have through hole ones, and then you've got to determine how much space you want to put, your bottom board from your top board in order to get like an ideal diffusion pattern, right? And so depending on like what year we are, so like for example, this phone badge has besides the 7 segment displays, only has 3 LEDs.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's just the top by the earpiece, the little icon, which the little bell icon, and then the bottom by the microphone, right? So it's like these badges have just been a lot of experimentation in terms of spacing, in terms of yeah, like just how lights show on through a diffused PCB.
Wow,
So
cool. Ah, love it. Um, so we're coming near the end here. I want to make sure that we show everybody your links. Uh, uh, everyone, the links, mostly of most of the ones that we've shown. I do need a coffee. That comment was right. Most of the ones we've shown are in the description. You can just scroll down and click on those. We've got Toymakers together. We've got Addie and Whisker, and I figure we can close out with hearing a bit about your trailer and the stuff that you've done there. Mm,
yeah, yeah. So so
such things.
we used to do a podcast called Zombie Tech, and yeah, and it was a podcast where we talked to scientists and engineers and inventors about technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
Wow.
And so we decided to get some land and build our own little zombie place, as a joke, I guess. But what happened was we ended up taking a horse trailer, which you were just showing pictures of, and converting it into a camper. And so we pretty much gutted it. I learned how to weld. I learned how to bondo this horse trailer, and horse trailers are actually super tall. So Whisker's like a pretty tall guy, and unlike typical cargo trailers, like this, he doesn't hit his head, which is really nice. But we took it apart. We installed new cedar panels. That's what you see there.
That's
We actually
very
made the
pretty.
windows for the trailer. Like we took out the ratty old trailer windows because they were like leaking or leaky, I guess. And then we made our own windows. Oh, there's our puppy. Um,
No. Lots of pictures of puppy.
yeah, and he was helping. And then we like on the inside. Um, so let's see. These pictures are all
Should we
yeah,
scroll forward?
just yeah. Yep, keep going forward. So we like did foam insulation on it. Um, and then more puppy. Put a door, and it's so funny. That door is like 3 inches shorter than when it came to us. So Whisker had to actually like cut the bottom of it and then reseal it in order for it to like work in that space.
Whoa.
Um, and and I think like one of my favorite pictures is the interior actually. So if you look at the interior, maybe go up one more,
Sure. It already looks
a
gorgeous there.
few
Oh,
more.
look at this. Oh, to
Yeah,
mention the.
that's me in the truck. Yeah,
Ah,
and our land. Gosh, where is that picture?
I'm enjoying this, whole little adventure, so
Oh, here we go. There's the interior of it.
Ooh.
So it's so funny. Those are furring strips. So we were like, oh, like what kind of interior could you do? Like, could you use flooring? But the flooring boards were so wide, and I really wanted that like more Scandinavian look almost, right?
Mm.
And so we used furring strips. We sliced them down the middle, and then kind of added an edge to it, so it was like almost so they would overlap each other, right? Like a little lip. And then we pretty much just like glued it glued it onto, and like Brad nailed it onto the backing furring strips that we had used, which you saw earlier, like the little ribs. And
Oh.
yeah, and then that little thing in the back there, that brown, like it used to be like a spice rack that we found at Restore. And but it holds like nails perfectly. It holds our my glasses, like flashlight, just perfectly. But so if it's so funny, if you go to an earlier picture, yeah, so like that deck right there, nope,
This one.
yeah, yeah, that one. So you know it's a 40-acre lot, which sounds like a ton until you're like until it's completely open, and then you're like, oh, I can see my borders. And but what that means is that your neighbors also have 40-acre plots, and they're very they're kind of like, hey, who are you guys? You guys just suddenly parked a trailer on this land. What are you guys up to? And we're like, oh, we're gonna stick this horse trailer on a deck. And they're like, why? And we're like, well, scorpions, mountain lions, rattlesnakes. We're just gonna like, make ourselves
A little
scarce, right?
buffer, a
Like,
little air
right,
buffer.
that's right, exactly. And they just looked at me super funny. But they were like, you know what? What the heck? Let's do it. Let's go for it. And so they came, and they didn't even know us. They were complete strangers, and they came and they helped us put together this deck.
Aw.
And it was funny because one of our neighbors he used to be a framer, a professional framer.
Huh.
And he looked at the deck, and we were going for like a cantilevered sort of system with the trailer as like the the thing to kind of hold it down. And Fuzzy, the framer, was like, "Oh, no, guys, this is not going to hold up." And he's like started going underneath it while it was still like unbalanced. Yeah, I know.
Oh.
And he was like putting beams and whatever. And he's like, "Guys, you need to learn some framing because you guys do not know what you're doing." And you know what that means, right, Alex? I mean, like,
Uh-oh.
when okay, right? Yeah, exactly. Someone tells me I don't
New
know
rabbit hole.
framing. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna learn framing.
Mhm.
So I no joke, John Shook, one of our friends, John Saz, he recommended a book to me. So I took that book, and I designed essentially a cabin.
Oh my gosh.
And so this past June, we actually built it by hand, and it was a lot bigger in person than on FreeCAD. I'll
Hmm.
tell you that much. Because like one half of it, like one side of it is 12 feet, and the other side is like 16. But but again, we're trying to avoid the mountain lions, so everything's off the ground a little bit. So really, like one side's 16 feet, one side's like 24 feet when all is said and done. And
Is this the
I could
cabin here?
no, 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 it's not. That's our studio. Yeah.
No.
But I'll have to find pictures. Um, but I actually don't know if we took pictures.
I
I
gotta
mean, we
ask
did
if
take pictures. I just don't know if we released them.
I gotta ask if you've got, like, any cool well, you built a private phone system for one of your structures. Is that right?
A film system?
Phone system?
Oh, oh gosh.
You got this.
Yeah. So that was actually documentation for oh, well, all right, so we do technically have a private phone system in the house. So we turned all of our like phone jacks into in like an internal system.
Huh?
Where so like if Whisker's in the workshop and I'm upstairs, he can just call me and he can be like, "Hey, I need my whatever."
I love
So
this.
technically I guess we have, but like yeah, so slightly different project, but yeah, so anyway, so we built, it's so funny because we built
I love this.
the shed or cabin this past June, and Fuzzy came by again, the framer, and he's like,
Mhm.
"Why is this so overbuilt?" And I'm like, "Fuzzy, this is your fault. You said I couldn't do it." So but he helped us, and it's a pretty cool little place. We're still working on it. It's still very much just studs at this point, studs and outer walls, but we'll be working on electrical next, and I guess I'm gonna have to figure out how that works. I can't figure out like battery power, but I guess we'll have to figure out 100 amp service, and go from there. So
All
yeah.
right. Well, I feel like it's about time to wrap this up, but I'm very excited to hear about the next chapter. Whether we run into each other in person or
Yeah.
maybe have you on again at some point in the future. Ah, so much cool stuff. So much cool stuff. And so everyone, again, you can find links in the description. There's the Toymakers main site where you can find sort of a relay to all the different stuff that's up here. We've got Addie on Twitter, we've got Toymakers on Twitter, we've got Whisker on Twitter, Sarah Petkus, aka Spitku, we got Wire Engineer, you've got an Instructables, you've got chiptunes. You're working on an album. We didn't even get to that
Oh my
part,
gosh,
but
yeah.
I gave it a listen and I really liked it. I played it like in
Oh,
our living room, and my housemates were like, "Oh, what is this? This is cool."
cool.
Very cool. So I'm waiting for that album. If you need an extra little push, there you go.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
I can't wait, and I'm gonna be jamming to that for a while. So thank you so much, Addie, for sharing all your cool stuff that you're doing with us, and have an awesome rest of your day. Thanks everyone for joining me.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Cheers. Yeah, you too.